Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xinyi Zhang. Today, my partner Su Yuanpeng and I are going to be talking about the LIMS article, Test Format Effects, a Combinatorial Approach to Second Language Reading. Here is the outline of our presentation. I will begin by the background of study to the results of study, and Su Yuanpeng will finish the rest of the presentation. So, let's get started. First things first, background of study. Numerous combinatorial analyses have been performed to explore the variables that contribution to second language learners' reading comprehension. Zhong and Yamashita have found variables through combinatorial studies, such as high evidence correlates, other language-related variables, and language-independent variables. Second language researchers are still continuing to figure out the additional predictive variables. Based on these research, the study revisits the popular issue of sub-reading components that affect second language reading comprehension while highlighting the effects of the test format. Then, what is combinatorial approach? It mainly assumes that reading ability is a collection of several distinctive, empirically separable sub-reading skills that are applied to produce the reading comprehension. Its analysis involves identifying the components of the reading construct and comparing each component's relative contribution to reading comprehension. Also, multiple-choice test questions, recall tests, cloze tests are used in combinatorial studies of L2. Second language reading is usually assessed by testing how learners performed on scored items, such as multiple-choice questions, true or false questions, etc. Test format effect is usually associated with the test validity. Specifically, it engages to figure out whether the test measures what it is supposed to measure, and it has a relationship with test-taking strategies. For example, learners can take advantages of multiple-choice questions by using clues embedded in options. Second part. Purpose of study. The study compares learners' performance on the MC test to their performance on the STEM equivalent OE test in an attempt to examine whether the dynamics between sub-reading components change depending on the test format. The first question is, do test scores differ systematically depending on the test format? The second question is, do the predictors of test scores differ systematically depending on the test format? Third, significance of study. Of special interest to this study, it primarily explores the connection between test formats and different dimensions of the reading construct. And these studies have discussed the effect of text format on the combinatorial analysis, while rare studies have discussed this topic. Fourth, methodology. According to the participants, there were 90 Chinese ESL students participated in the study who were at the post-secondary level. No one had lived in the USA for more than 5 years. They took 2 TOEFL practice testlets, one with MC questions and the other one with STEM equivalent OE questions. They had done many types of questions, including reading tests, vocabulary tests, grammar tests, etc. In the procedure, the students were asked to finish the tasks on 2 different days with a 1-week interval between sessions, and each session was during approximately for an hour and a half. The data were collected on an individual basis in a language lab. Regards to the data analysis, a dummy variables regression was performed to answer the first question. The predictive regression analysis was performed for both MC and OE to answer the second question. In the regression analysis, the test scores were regarded as the dependent variable, and the sub-reading skills were regarded as candidate predictors. Fifth, results analysis. The results show that performance on the multiple questions were better than the corresponding OE questions. So the test scores differ systematically depending on the test format. Vocabulary knowledge was the only significant predictor of MC test scores. For the OE reading test, grammar knowledge, word recognition skills, and possibly inferencing strategies were found to be significant predictors. Okay, now Siyuan will show you all about the rest of presentation.
Thank you, Xinyi. Now let's move on to part 6. In this part, we will talk about the interpretation, namely discussion of the results in this article. Okay, the first one, test format effect. The test format indeed had an effect, even when the test effect was taken into account or when the test difficulty variable is controlled. The second regression model suggests that participants perform better in a multiple-choice format on the lake water reading passage. The format effect also relates to learners' use of test-taking strategy. For example, students who are well-versed in test-taking strategy specific to a multiple-choice format will take advantage of the multiple-choice question items and perform differently on the open-ended test. Thirdly, vocabulary knowledge alone predicted the multiple-choice test scores, while grammar knowledge and word recognition skills together predicted the open-ended test scores. Finally, the sub-reading components have different levels of power in contributing to test scores depending on the test format. Second, other sub-reading components. However, this study still emphasized that other sub-reading components, including working memory, sentence processing skills, and learners' use of strategy, failed to predict either the multiple choice or the open-ended reading test scores, although the test format relates to some of these components to some extent. Thirdly, this study also discusses the critique of the validity of multiple choice items and provides another perspective. The reason why the multiple choice test is not the best L2 reading test is that these items only evoke a limited range of construct relevant skills and knowledge. In this study, vocabulary knowledge was the only significant predictor of the multiple choice test scores, whereas grammar knowledge and word recognition skills together contributed to the open-ended test scores. In addition, the multiple choice test failed to measure learners' processing skills at either the sentential or the lexical level. However, the open-ended test seems to gain superiority to the multiple choice test in terms of assessing the fluency aspect of reading. In this regard, the validity of the multiple choice test is probably not good enough. Part 7. Conclusion. This study aimed to examine the format effect in L2 reading test by means of componential analysis. It shows that the participants scored higher on the multiple choice test than on the open-ended test. More importantly, an L2 reading test in a different format involved different sub-reading components. Furthermore, Open-ended items involve a wider range of cognitive processes, but also these items require a greater number of knowledge sources than the multiple choice items. Then we come to Part 8, Limitations and Suggestions. Admittedly, this study has some limitations. It relies heavily on correlation-based statistics, using only 2 reading passages, 2 topics, and 1 homogeneous group. Another problem lies in designing and administering the strategy questionnaires, which would aggregate numerical values based on questionnaire responses. Therefore, the results do not inform us of what is occurring in the test taker's minds during the test, or how a test taker handled a keep option or destructor. Furthermore, the multicollinearity issue cannot be disregarded. In other words, although vocabulary knowledge failed to predict the open-ended test scores, the result does not minimize the important roles of vocabulary knowledge in reading comprehension. Despite some limitations, this study provides some suggestions for future research. As this study mainly used a quantitative approach, future studies can focus on qualitative aspects by using interviews or eye trackers. For example, eye-tracking research will allow us to examine the reading processes or skills like skimming and scanning that test takers use in real time. Secondly, this study has tried to answer the question of whether the role of sub-reading skills varies systematically depending on the test format. Therefore, future studies can emphasize on the how question to explore the underlying structure of the reading construct being tested, to identify the determinants of each construct, and to inspect test takers' cognition during a test. Part 9. Critique. This study has its strengths and weaknesses. The structure of this article is clear and well organized, with a concise summary in the introduction. The procedures are presented in detail, and the data are analyzed with professional tools. This article is closely related to previous studies and provides some guidance for future research. However, research gap is not clearly demonstrated in this article. The methodology applied in this study is simple, which is not sufficient to get enough evidence. The sample size of participants is small, and the results would be not representative enough. Finally, it is the discussion part. As this study is mainly about the test format, the question to be discussed is which test format will you use more frequently in your reading test design? Multiple choice reading questions or open-ended reading questions. That's all of our presentation. Thank you for listening.